In last lecture, we created this person object, and this person object has three properties: name, birth year, and job. And it also has two methods: calculate age and greet. Now, if you notice, this calculate age method has a birth year parameter. So when we call this calculate age method, we will have to pass a value for this birth year parameter. And based on that value, this calculate age method will calculate the age and it will return it. Now, this person object already has a birth year property. So instead of getting the value for this birth year while calling this calculate age function, what we want here is we want to use the birth year property of this person object to calculate the age. So we don't want to get the value for this birth year while calling the function. Instead, we want to use this birth year property for calculating the age. So here, now what I'm expecting is when I say 2021 minus birth year, this birth year will use this value, the value of this property, and then it will calculate the age and it will return it. So let's remove this argument from here because now the calculate age method is not taking any parameter. If I save the changes, you will notice that we have an error. Birth year is not defined. And this error is because this birth year is not a regular variable. It is a property. Okay, so this birth year is a property. And we can access the property of an object by using either dot notation on that object or by using square bracket notation on that object. So let's say we want to use this birth year property of this person object to calculate the age. In that case, we will have to use the object name, which is person in this case, dot the property name, which is birth year. Okay, so now when I save the changes, this program, this calculate age method should calculate the age and it should return it. And that's what you see logged here. So now this calculate age method is successfully calculating the age based on the value of this birth year property and it is returning it. And here we are calling this calculate age method. So here that age will be returned and it will be stored in the age variable, and then we are logging it. So when we log it here, 31 is logged. Now if I change this value from 1990 to 1995, this new value 1995 will be used to calculate the age. So here now age is 26. Okay, so it is working as expected. But this code, this way of accessing a property inside a method is not a reliable way. And let me explain you why. Now let's say we decide to copy this person object to another variable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable. Let's call it user. And to this user variable, I will assign this person object. Okay. So behind the scene, JavaScript engine will create a new user object, and this user object will also have this name, birth year, job property with these same values, and it will also have this calculate age method and greet method with the same function definition. So behind the scenes, a new user object will be created and it will have this name, birth year, job property with these same values which we have for person object. And it will also have this calculate age method and greet method, and the definition for both of them will be same. And this is because we have copied this object to this user object. Okay, so now let's say I want to call the calculate age method on this user object. So this user object has this calculate age method. So when I say user dot calculate age, and this calculate age will return some value, so let's directly log it in the developer console. So let's say console.log, and let's log the value returned by this calculate age method here. If I save the changes, you will see that it has logged 26. If I change the value of this birth year property here, let's say I set it to 1980, and if I save the changes, it is logging 41. So here we are changing the value of the birth year property of person object, and it is also affecting the user object. okay, while calculating the age. So why is that? That is because if you notice here, when we copied this person object to the user object, the definition of this calculate age method also get copied. And in the definition, we have person.birth here. So when we call this calculate age method on the user object, this function will be called. And inside this function, we are using the birth year property of this person object, right? So that's why it is using this birth year property of this person object, the value of the birth year property of this person object. And based on that, it is calculating the age. Now, let's say I set the person object to null. That means I have destroyed this person object. So this person object is no more there in the memory. Now, after destroying this person object, if I call this calculate age method on this user object, let's see what happens. So let's first comment this because we have set this person object to null and we are trying to call this calculate age method on that null. So it will throw an error. So let's comment it here. And here we are calling this calculate age method on this user object. So this method will be called. And inside this method, we are trying to use the birth year property of this person object, right? But this person object we have set to null. So that's why when I save the change, you will see that we have an error. So birth year of null cannot read property birth year of null. And that's why this code is unreliable. Okay. So instead of using the property of an object like this by saying person.birth here, instead of using person.birth here, we can use this keyword. So we can say this dot birth here. Okay. And now when we copy this person object to user object here, inside this function, it will also get, it will also copy this definition and this time it will be this dot birth here. Now what is this here? This is a variable. This is a special type of variable which points to the current object. Okay, so what do we mean by that? By that we mean that when we call this calculate age method on user object, this variable inside this calculate age method will point to user object. So during runtime, this will be replaced by user object. So that means when we run this program, when this function will calculate the age, it will subtract, it will replace this with user. So here it will use user.birth here and user.birth here is 1980. So this value will be used. When we call this calculate age method on person object, then this during the runtime, this variable will be replaced by person object. So while calculating the age, it will use person.birth here. Okay, so this points to the current object. Now if I save the changes, you see the error is gone. We have set this person to null and then we are calling this calculate age method on this user object. So this function will be called. Inside this function, we are returning 2021 minus this dot birth here. Now, since we are calling this calculate age method on this user object, this will be replaced by user object. So here it will use the birth year property of user object. And what is the value of the birth year property of user object? It is 1995. So this value will be used. Okay, so now this code is more reliable and less prone to bugs. So this keyword is a special type of variable in JavaScript which points to the current object. Okay, so I hope this example is clear to you now. So let's comment this code here so that you can reference it later, and let's comment this code as well. Let's create two new objects. Let's first create John object, and let's say this John object has three properties. Name is John, and let's say it has age property and age is, let's say, 28. Okay, And let's say this John object also has a method, and let's call it greeting. Okay, so let's assign an anonymous function to this, and let's simply log a message which says, hi, this dot name, or let's say, hi, my name is this dot name, and here we have to use this plus operator, and let's say, and I am this dot age years old. Okay, let's create another object. Let's call it mark, and let's say mark also has two properties: name, which is mark, and age, which is, let's say, mark is 30 years old. Okay, but this mark object does not have a greeting property, but it is possible to borrow a method from other object. So let's say mark dot greeting equals John dot greeting. So if you remember, we have learned that we can create a property for an object after we have, after the object is created. So here we are creating a greeting property for this mark object, and to this greeting property of this mark object, we are assigning the greeting method of John object. So now this mark object also has a greeting method, and its definition is same to that of this, this greetings method. Now let's call the greetings method on mark and John object. So let's say John dot greeting, and let's also call greeting object on greeting method on mark object. So mark dot greeting. All right. Now if I save the changes, you see the output says, hi, my name is John and I am 28 years old. And the second output says, hi, my name is Mark and I am 30 years old. So when we call this greeting method on this John object, this will point to John object. So here during runtime, this will be evaluated and it will be set to John. So here it will be John.name. So here John.name will be used. And what is the name here? Value of this name property, it is John. And similarly, here John.age will be used, and age is 28. And that's why here in the output we have, my name is John and I am 28 years old. Now when we call this greeting method on the mark object, this in this method will be replaced by mark object, or it will be evaluated. It will point to mark object. So during runtime, this will be, replaced with mark, and here mark.name will be used, the value for mark.name, and here the value for mark.age will be used. So what is mark.name? It is Mark. And what is mark.age? It is 30. And that's what you see in the output. So this points to the current object. Okay, this points to the object on which a method is called. We will talk about this variable in great detail in one of our future lectures with more examples. But for now, if this lecture is confusing for you, then just remember that the this keyword is a special type of variable. Okay, this keyword is a special type of variable in JavaScript which points to the current object. And you will understand this in more detail when we will talk about this keyword in one of our future lectures.